So in this video, I'd like to help you work through what is one of our most heavy, most dense, and darkest forms of emotional energy, and that is toxic shame. So this is shame that we've internalized in large part from the very first people that we knew. And it's also the buildup of long-term unhealed shame. And so it's really one of the darkest parts of our shadow because, by definition, we are repelled by the judgments that it holds, whether these came from us or from other people. And so it's really kind of like the cellar or the crawl space, if you will, of the psychic house we live in. So if you remember the film Inception, I would say that shame is like the final level that they descend to. So much core programming happened on this level, and it's like moving from the motherboard and then realizing, like, no, you really need to go into the chipset, which has its own logic. And so before I really get into this, though, I just wanted to take like 2 minutes to welcome you if you're new to my channel. And if you want to skip this part, you can just jump ahead about 2 minutes. But I just wanted to say a bit about this project, which is in progress. And so this is about like everything pertaining to our experience of consciousness living as embodied human beings. And so this sounds abstract, but I'm really approaching this through the idea of our self and our journey through self-realization, which is incredibly deep. And it really includes everything that really matters. And so within this framework, like sometimes I'm looking at issues in healing on physical level. A lot of the time it's on the emotional and mental level. But I could also be talking about like Jungian approaches to the development of our psyche or larger spiritual topics that, or insofar as they do impact our lived experience. And part of my goal with this channel is to start to bring in others with whom we can have really specific conversations, really intelligent conversations on these topics to help us remember our purpose or how to stay in alignment with it, because we're constantly falling back asleep and we're constantly falling out of alignment. And so that's really like the essence behind aligned self-review, because we actually need to make a habit of studying the self, and we need to specifically study how to find our alignment and how to keep it. Because if you're not making this explicit, and if you're not like proactively moving towards further internal integration, our reality here is just set up that like it's completely entropic and it will just eventually pull you apart, either through physical health or through like complete dissociation mentally, all of which causes us to bleed energy. So this is about like really basic training in using what is basically our empathy. It's our capacity for sensing and receiving, I would say. And I'll talk more about that later. But for now, if this interests you, I hope you'll subscribe and come back and watch my other videos. And I'm feeling really encouraged by the last month, the support I've seen, and just feeling really grateful and positive about the direction that I think I can take this in. Okay, so let's get back to the topic of healing shame. So first off, let's just acknowledge, obviously there is some degree of healthy shame. There is a healthy shame response. Not all shame is toxic. And you can think of shame as more like a dormant cancer, maybe, that comes back whenever it's activated. This is the toxic level. But a healthy shame response is more short-lived, and it's more of a genuine emotional reaction in response to where we know we've failed ourselves or where we could have handled something better. And it's meant to just give us the lesson, and then we learn it and we move on going forward. But toxic shame is like a real dumpster bin of a lot of things, like that we haven't taken action on, or things other people have said, or generational trauma. Past life residues are in here. In general, it's just like this general energetic backlog, really, and it's clogging certain networks within us, and it slows us down and it weighs us down. And so what we need to do, to put this like really simply, I think, is just to fully identify our shame, to learn it, to learn like where it hangs out, the shape of it, when it's triggered, and how it affects our body, how it feels. And that's the first level. And then to go deeper into self compassion and to really find a way to love this part of ourselves, to fully recognize and accept it, and to accept our relationship with it, to understand like why we're in this relationship, how our shame, how we have allowed it to grow really as symptomatic of our self neglect or various kinds of self abandonment. And part of this is learning like what this shame is the trace of us wanting to express that we didn't express. It's the unexpressed within us, basically. And so, in other words, you have to find a way to love this part of yourself and just to fully accept it and understand it. Like, has it been working to protect another part of yourself, for example? And so, what you do here is now you start working with letting the shame express itself. Whatever was in there that hadn't been expressed yet, you find ways to start acting on that in accordance with your own authentic path, your own understanding of like where you want to go and who you really are. And so, because this is what it's originally a trace of anyway, the shadow of. And so basically, maybe this is like a twisted ball of yarn and you're like slowly pulling at the threads to untangle it. Or this is like the contents of like boxes that are still unpacked, like that you've had ever since you moved in to this life. And you just carefully start unwinding these threads or knitting with them and using this energy, actively engaging with it in a direction that really like opens your vibration really to vibrate higher, so to speak. And it's just like the videos where we've seen someone trying to like pour clean water into like a glass of dirty water and eventually it clears out. Sure, but like maybe a more efficient way is to just start with the dirt at the bottom of the glass and work on dumping that out first. I truly think that if you can transmute just like an ounce of this shame, this is such leverage. This is, what can't you do, right? Because this is the densest part of who we are. Shame really represents like our biggest internal battle. And if you're familiar with mystic scholar Carolyn Mace, she said something very similar along the lines of humiliation being the driving force of the human ego. We will structure everything so that we are basically working to avoid humiliation. And you can see this is tightly tied to this original shame network. So if you can start transmuting at that level, maybe like it's gonna take a few trips, but I truly think then like we can do anything, right? Because this is our greatest internal point of resistance. And now let me know if you see this in another way, but the way I'm seeing shame now is really as like the shadow of desire or the shadow of love in this human egoic form. And so the brighter or more intense our yearnings, the more like effortfully, and intensely we pursue them, the darker this shadow can get until we learn that who the we is larger even than this human love or desire, which is just everything that we desire to do. Basically, it's on the egoic level. And so once we can move on to that third higher plane of awareness, we're no longer caught in this identification with this original desire of the investment of our energy that propels us forward through our egoic life. And so then you can come into a space where you can identify with this higher form of love and action, which really embodies the the shadowed area of the shame as well. So let me know if that makes sense. I know this is like a model, it's a simplification, but this is basically, it's good to have a framework for being able to actively work with this energy. And so I think it's helpful to see it in that way. And so ultimately, what I think is really important to know here is that to help heal this area within us, what we need to do is make sure that we're taking actions that are rooted in our authentic self expression, which find ways to be conscious of this shame and everything it expresses. This is like the unexpressed self, I would say. Find ways to include it or relate to it, which allow us to give it like fresh air, give it a chance to speak. Rather than like just pursuing like feel good actions that are actually highly dissociated from the rest of who we are and might actually work to darken or add to this unaddressed pool of shame. So there's a really good quote from the writer Brianna Wiest that I like here, and she said something about like making sure you're not deceiving yourself into pursuing something that you call a solution, but it's actually still really just a distraction from your problem. And she had like a really good way of articulating that. And it's basically like that's the sense in which shame is really the darkest part of our shadow. And it's like the negative reflection or the inverted reflection of our self expression. It's the unexpressed, or it felt like it didn't have safety to express itself, or it's a kind of self censorship. And so, how do we move to this third higher level, which can include the shame along with the desire and the love and the self expression? Remember, because these are kind of like polarities of each other. And I think this is where self compassion comes in for a second time to make this bridge, because it can allow us to hold these together to give simultaneous space for this within our experience. And, if we keep shame conscious and alive and we carry it out with us when we do our errands, then we can actually hear from it, and it will give us reminders throughout the day of like what we actually came here to do. And so I know that what I've said here so far sounds quite easier said than done. But in terms of like actually starting to put this into practice, I would suggest starting by identifying the areas or like most recent episodes where your shame has been activated. And write it down and just explore what comes up for you. So the thing I think I've noticed is that shame is like really good at hiding itself. And so the trigger for you might initially look like something else, like it felt like someone was attacking you, or maybe someone judged you. And, as you sit with these feelings, shame might also start to slowly rise up in there, and then you can recognize it. So I would say start with this list, either of times your shame was triggered, or you can do this more deliberately if you can, and just go right into listing out like the places where you are already consciously aware of different aspects of your shame. And see if you can actually like enter into these shame states and see how deep you can go. Like, remember the film Inception. It might take a few trips, but see if you can find this little like black box of your original shame programming and just see how that feels, and explore like what's in there. What is it making you believe about yourself? And then you can just go from there. So I think that's enough for now for this video. But let me know like if there's something else that I could go more in depth on for you. And you know, but I truly believe like that this is our greatest point of leverage in the inner work. If you can find a way to like transmute like even 1 ounce of this network of like tangled energy inside you, you can like you have so much leverage, like you have so much more energy coming in for your own highest path of self-expression, which is what this energy wanted in the first place. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the comments.